I'm Peyton Glaze.
I'm Carly Crittenden.
I'm Katie Vincer.
And I'm Jared Wise.
And today we're going to be presenting an authentic Russian meal plan. So to begin, I just wanted to talk about a few aspects of the Russian culture. So I'm sure it's not surprising that about 81% of the population in Russia, in fact, speaks Russian. But I wanted to point out the language because there's also many other languages that are represented in Russia, including those of Tatar, Ukrainian, and Chuvash. I also wanted to say that the primary religion in Russia is Orthodox Christianity. Now, we know that Orthodox Christians follow very strict kosher food laws, and this will be important when we're discussing our one-day meal plan. And finally, our focus for today is going to be talking about common everyday meals that a Russian citizen would consume on a daily basis. And so to begin, we're going to start off with a very common breakfast dish in Russia called kasha. Now, kasha is very similar to what Americans would call oatmeal or porridge. It's made of buckwheat, water, salt, and butter. It's very simple ingredients. And depending on what flavor you're trying to accomplish, you can add things like mushrooms, onions, berries, honey, milk, or meat. Now, the reason that I highlighted butter, milk, and meat is because if you're following these kosher diet guidelines, you can't mix these two. You can't have butter with meat. In addition, you can't have milk with meat. And so that's something to think about if you were to prepare this meal plan for an authentic Russian home, you would have to make sure that you don't get any of this confused. And the preparation methods for kasha are very simple. All you have to do is boil water, make sure that the buckwheat doesn't have any impurities in it, toast the buckwheat, and then finally add the boiling water to the buckwheat.
Lunch in Russia is typically eaten around 1 and 2 p.m. A very traditional Russian lunch is shi, which is a very traditional cabbage soup. This can be served hot or cold, but since the cold season is very long in Russia, it's typically served hot. The major ingredients in this dish are olive oil, cabbage, carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, beef stock, bay leaves, and kosher salt and pepper. I have here highlighted olive oil, beef stock, and the kosher salt and pepper because these are important to the kosher diet. Olive oil is considered a kosher oil, and so whenever the vegetables are being sauteed, it'll follow the guideline then. Beef stock is considered kosher if it is from an animal or from cattle that have been raised and prepared as kosher. And then of course the kosher salt and pepper. Preparation methods for this dish: you saute thinly sliced onions and shredded carrots for about 3 to 5 minutes in olive oil. Add diced potatoes, shredded cabbage, bay leaves, and beef stock. Cover this and simmer for about 20 minutes. Then add diced tomatoes and season with kosher salt and pepper. Typically, people in Russia will eat this dish with sour cream on top. However, sour cream is kind of a controversial kosher food product because the bacteria that's used to produce the sour cream is set in a media, and this media can consist of glucose. Typically, glucose is derived from wheat in Europe, which would then conflict with Passover, which wheat cannot be eaten during Passover.
Once dinner comes around, a popular dish in Russia is beef stroganoff. This dish originated in the mid-19th century, and there's a legend behind it that says a French chef created this dish for the Stroganoff family because Count Stroganoff in his old age started to have poor brittle teeth and couldn't eat his steak that he so loved. The chef then played on this dish and cut this meat into smaller bite-sized pieces and fit it inside a creamy sauce over a bed of broad noodles. So in this ingredients is peppered steak, olive oil, onion, garlic, mushrooms, white wine, beef broth, tofudi, sour supreme, cornstarch, and large egg noodles. I have Tafiti Sour Supreme highlighted here because it's imitation for sour cream, since sour cream isn't necessarily kosher. This Tafiti Sour Supreme is both kosher and parve. To make this recipe, you start by browning your beef strips in oil, adding mushrooms, and sauteing. Then you proceed to deglaze with white wine, and then a fun little tip is that you add cornstarch and water to thicken up the sauce. This can be served over both broad noodles and mashed potatoes.
As for dessert, we decided to go with the Petrushka, which comes from the word batra, which means fire. It is an Eastern European pastry with a ring of dough and cheese filling in the middle. Raisins or other bits of fruits can be added to add a little bit of taste to it. The pastry is about 5 inches in diameter, and it's kind of similar to what we Americans know as the Danish. The first rule of thumb when it comes to making this dessert/snack is to make sure that your ingredients are kosher based. A good rule of thumb is to make sure if it's kosher, it'll have this on the front label of the product. So look for these 4 labels. If it has any of these, that means it's kosher. So that's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. Ingredients include purpose flour for the dough, active dry yeast for the dough, sugar, warm milk, salt, and egg for the dough. As for the cheese, it includes unsalted cheese, sour cream, another controversial ingredient like my previous classmate said, vanilla extract, sugar, and egg. Another rule of thumb is to make sure that you are sanitizing every equipment after every step of the process to make this dessert. As for the dough, you stir the yeast, sugar, and the warm milk together. You combine the flour and salt, and at the end you add the melted butter, flour, and yeast mixture into the mix. To make the cheese filling, you mix all the ingredients for the cheese fillings that I mentioned earlier for about 5 to 6 minutes. As for the final product, you cut the dough into 6 or 8 equal pieces. You get a cup and you make a hollow center. You take the cheese filling and put that in there, and then you bake it. Another law that we should keep in mind is to make sure that whoever's turning on the oven is of Jewish religion in order to make it kosher.
So here we have a chart that just kind of describes the price differences between some of the major ingredients in each of our dishes. So in kasha, the main ingredient was buckwheat. And it was found that there's not really a large price difference between buckwheat and multiple different types of stores. Only a few cents difference here.
She is sold already prepared in Russian family restaurants, and it's typically about $7. But if you do go to a Russian market in Russia, then it's significantly cheaper. It's approximately $4.47. This is due to the fact that it's a very common and traditional dish in Russia, and it's very easy to find.
In beef stroganoff, the main ingredient is beef. And in this religion, it's important to keep the beef kosher. That is why you can see that there's a price difference that is so monumental. This goes back to the fact of the more extensive process it takes to make meat kosher.
As for the Petrushka, I found all the ingredients at our local stores. You can find them either at Walmart or H-E-B. I did notice that most of the kosher items are cheaper in Walmart. So, yeah.
It is important to create a one-day meal plan in this industry to acquire the necessary skills to create any diet.
And these are our references and our image references.